work. So agenda today, quite quick. We're going to go through some introductions, which I will lead that. We will then go through the current threats organization are facing. So George from RedScan will pick this up. We'll go through a holistic view about that. I will then pick up very briefly what is an EDR, MDR service, and then go into more detail around what the Microsoft approach is to EDR and MDR via Sentinel and Defender, and how the Ultima RedScan service, MDR and EDR service, fits into that Microsoft Centric approach. And then, like I say, we've got Q&A at the end. We'll go through asking some questions, some pre-packaged ones, and we'll then go ahead and anything we don't get through, if there's too many questions, probably won't be, but if there are too many questions, we will send out emails afterwards with the answers on to everybody and share those things. So today we've got myself. Firstly, apologies. You may have been expecting the fantastic Chris Watkins, one of my colleagues. Sadly, he's had to drop out last minute, so you're stuck with me. I'm the head of consulting at Ultima. So I've been a technical head doing consultancy and strategy for businesses for about 20 years now. And then at my current role is I'm in charge at Ultima for all of the technical resources, so solution architects, business consultants, technical consultants, second and third lines support, as well as our third party model as well. And George, I'll quickly hand over to you to quickly talk about who you are and what you do.
Good morning, everyone. My name is George Glass. I'm the head of threat intelligence for RedScan. I've worked in defense, finance, e-commerce, and MSPs. And my role at RedScan is to head up the threat intelligence department, collect indicators of compromise, understand what threat actors are doing, and hopefully communicate that in a meaningful way to help detection and response.
Great, thank you, George. And on that, I will hand over to you to go and talk a bit about those threats and how they're seen and what we can do about it.
Thank you very much. Let me just get my screen set up here. Whoops. Can you see that okay? I hope so.
I can personally see the top left-hand corner of your screen.
Oh no, hang on, let me try that again. There we go. I think that's the problem with the multi-monitor setup. Hope you can see that. There we go. Right. So let's get into this. I think one of the more prominent threats today that you, I'm sure, have heard a lot about is, of course, ransomware. What I want to discuss today is exactly how threat actors are infiltrating environments and ways that we can detect and respond to that. So ransomware, obviously one of the most dominant threats at the moment, one of the most destructive, also one of the most financed threat groups there are. Honestly, on par with some advanced persistent threat groups that are funded by nation states. Because of the amount of ransom that they're pulling in, they have immense capability, and they have budgets to hire dozens of extremely skilled cyber criminals. Because of this, tactics and techniques are constantly changing to stay ahead of defenders. In this particular example I'm going to show you later, they've started attacking chatbots and web forms to deliver payloads inside organizations by bypassing typical email stacks. But sometimes they don't even need to be clever. Sometimes they just use remote desktop protocol, hit that with a word list, or still some easily decrypted passwords, and they gain access that way as well. So they run the whole gamut. You may recently have heard of the NCSC, Australian Cybersecurity Centre, FBI and CISA releasing a joint statement about the use of unpatched vulnerabilities in the cyber threat landscape, and indeed this still persists. Unpatched VMware solutions, Fortinet gateways, VPN gateways, obviously we had Exchange fairly recently. These are all used by ransomware threat actors very quickly after they come to light, and they're still used to this day. Some vulnerabilities dating back to 2019 are still used and abused today. And of course we have mouse spam, one of the biggest threats, easiest to deploy, some may say, and indeed there's a gap in the market in the mouse spam space since Emotet was destroyed by the authorities, and there's essentially an arms race between mouse spam campaigners of who has the best mouse spamming infrastructure that they again rent out to ransomware threat actors so that they can gain access to an organization. So how are threat actors gaining initial access? We've already mentioned the use of weak and easily decrypted passwords via RDP. Obviously, there's a number of security hardening measures that can be made to increase the security of remote desktop. Many of these are set up fairly rapidly when everyone started working from home, such as adding MFA and things like that. They typically get access, ransomware actors get access by just buying it wholesale. So here we have a post on a darknet forum. This is something that we took as well to alert our customers if they were involved in this leak. Luckily, no one was. But this is a list of something like 500,000 Fortinet gateways with the IPs and usernames and passwords for those gateways. Offered completely for free. They didn't even need to buy it. This was just a threat actor that posted it, and you know, that list was used and abused. And as I said before, these unpatched vulnerabilities continue to be a very serious problem for defenders and a method of entry for threat actors. But let's look at some of the evolving TTPs. One method that a particular mouse spam actor that delivers the iced ID malware is using is using artificial chat applications on websites. So you know the ones that pop up at the bottom and say, do you need any help with anything? This threat actor has been identified using a zip file, zipping it up and uploading it via that artificial chat application to deliver it to the operators and service workers behind, essentially bypassing all of the typical kind of email defenses that an organization may have. It simply just goes into a queue and someone opens it and clicks the file and they're infected. As I said, the document is infected with iced ID, one of the competitors to the Emotet malware now. And we've also seen them do it with a website form, just a simple contact us form. But what we found is this contact us form, again, bypasses the typical email stack and will arrive at the operator's inbox from an internal email address. So again, a zip file can be downloaded, the malicious document opened, and it drops iced ID. And indeed, more recently, what we're seeing is the Cobalt Strike post-exploitation framework being deployed almost immediately as well. One thing that's particularly interesting about this threat actor that we've observed is they move extremely quickly, far quicker than other ransomware actors. We've seen hands-on keyboard activity up to about an hour after the malware has been deployed. So the time needed to detect and respond to this is less than an hour, which is incredibly different from what we've seen before, where threat actor dwell time was very long. And of course, this is still a thing, but we know that there are threat actors out there that are basically waiting for the infections to roll in and get to work immediately. And so the path of ransomware is something like this. A vuln or commodity malware is exploited or deployed inside a network. A post-exploitation framework such as Cobalt Strike, Mimikatz, things like that are downloaded. From there, lateral movement and reconnaissance takes place almost immediately, with the view to get to a domain controller, and from there, ransomware is deployed. Again, there are many strains of ransomware and many methods of deployment. But one thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is there are some ransomware actors who don't use self-spreading ransomware. It doesn't propagate across the network. They simply get control of a domain controller and deploy all of the ransomware all at the same time across every device attached to that domain controller, essentially. So again, it really demonstrates the need to catch the threat actors inside the network before they move to those critical assets, catching it on the endpoint rather than on the domain controller, which is the very last stage of the attack, is vitally important. So we need to detect when the malware is inside a network at the earliest opportunity. Some of the best ways of doing that are to detect the detonation of the malware, the persistence mechanisms that it may install. Some of the surefire ways of detecting that is installation of services, registry edits, that kind of thing. We can detect internal reconnaissance when the malware does some automated internal reconnaissance to report back to the threat actors and the type of environment it thinks it's in. That's another really good way of identifying that there could be something wrong. And really the last place we want to be detecting for this sort of early detection and remediation action is as they're conducting their lateral movement to other devices as well. There's a number of ways that a threat actor could do the internal reconnaissance and the lateral movement, and that's where the MITRE ATT&CK framework really comes in extremely useful. We use the MITRE ATT&CK framework at RedScan very diligently, and we are ensuring that we have detections for all of the various tactics and techniques and procedures that a threat actor may choose to do to conduct some of these things, because it's all well and good being able to detect the threat that happened last week. We want to detect the threat that's happening today and tomorrow and next week as well. So in that way, having all of your bases covered with an EDR and a SIEM solution is one of the best ways to get that sort of defense in depth that everyone strives for. I'm just going to run through a couple of detection opportunities that are very well suited for EDR solutions. I won't go into too much technical detail, but I just want to demonstrate some of the capabilities of these solutions and how they can detect and respond very quickly to threats on an endpoint. So we want to capture when the maldoc detonates. When the maldoc detonates and when persistence is installed on the machine so that it can survive reboots and maintain persistent access to the network for the threat actors to download their post-exploitation framework and do their internal lateral movement. And this is where, obviously I'm fairly biased in this, but I think this is where having very good threat intelligence really comes into play. We see threat actors changing the way that their maldocs detonate and execute code on machines all the time. And so keeping up to date and trying to predict ways that threat actors may choose to infect an environment is extremely important. In this particular example that we're talking about, the IcedID payload uses WMIC calls to regserv32. That downloads a .gif which contains the entire IcedID malware. That is unpacked by a base64 encoded PowerShell, and the IcedID malware is executed using run DLL32, and the persistence is made by a scheduled task. All of these things are detection opportunities that we can use, especially on EDR solutions, to detect that something is out of the norm and something is certainly wrong. WMIC calls to regserv32 containing a GIF in the URL. Again, that's a huge red flag. That should never happen. And it's a really good detection for this particular form of IcedID. Base64 encoded PowerShell. Now that's certainly a tricky one. Lots of legitimate applications use base64 encoded PowerShell. But again, using that in conjunction with some of the other detections that we see can give us a really good picture of exactly what's happening. To aid analysis as well, lots of EDR platforms will automatically decode base64 so that an analyst can quite easily see the commands that particular encoded command is running as well. Run DLL32, when that executes the actual malware itself, again, there's a lot of run DLL32 usage in an environment, so it's not just a case of detecting that particular execution. It's about using the context of the other detections that we have, and again, all of this happens in about 20 seconds, to say, yes, okay, we have more evidence now of something malicious happening, and indeed, we need to investigate this as a matter of quite some urgency now. Finally, persistence via scheduled task creation. Again, probably something that outside of a couple of administrative tasks probably should be taking place day to day on in the typical user space. So again, using these indicators in a group, grouping those into a cohesive ticket is a really good way of detecting malware being executed, and this is the first stage in the attack as well. So if we can get a decent set of detections for that right off the bat, then we can detect and respond to this as early as possible. There's another really good detection opportunity just after the malware has run. IcedID and a lot of other malspam-borne malware will do some automated reconnaissance to send that information to the threat actors so they know what sort of environment they're running in. In this case, there's a liberal use of NL tests to understand the relationship between the machine and the domain it's on. Again, we have WMIC probing to see what antivirus products are on the machine. And all of these commands can be very easily captured by an EDR solution and used in the detection process as well. I think it's fair to say that this net commands, some of the NL test commands could be done by a normal administrator. But again, we need to have the context of what's going on elsewhere as well. We don't want to take all of these in isolation. So a group of these sorts of commands, especially WMIC, investigating what antivirus products are installed, and maybe given the fact that this was a service line operator's machine running these commands, all of that context is again a really good indicator that something is out of the norm and needs to be investigated with some urgency. And EDR solutions and SIEM solutions certainly help us to do that, especially with the ability to sort of remotely log onto the machine and see what's going on, isolate it from the rest of the domain so that the infection can't spread, and hopefully clean up and remediate before the threat actors can get some lateral movement in the environment. But I think that's about it from me. I will hand back to Matt. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, George. Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think that leads really nicely on to onto the next piece. Where I'm just going to talk a little bit more about EDR, what it is, in a bit more detail, and how the Microsoft Centric product stack can help, and how the RedScan and Ultima Service can help deliver some of those remediation activities that you just spoke about. So, what is the EDR? It really is an evolution of endpoint protection, starting all the way back from years ago, but not even that long ago, where essentially you had antivirus software which was sat there just detecting known activity or known identity of viruses. It'll recognize a DLL as being a virus, and those signatures would be detected, and then ultimately sometimes deleted, sometimes not. Those moved on to next generation ones, which are again better, and did some AI to detect viruses, so did some kind of behavioral analysis and a bit of machine learning. But again, a lot of it was based on signatures and on if X happens, then do Y. And again, not ultimately is a reactive service, just looking at what's happened on that endpoint, and then on that specific endpoint, and then going ahead and trying to deal with it. And if it can't deal with it, sending an alert saying I've got a virus. That moves on to the kind of the next generation endpoint protections platforms, which again provide a bit more of that holistic endpoint protection from malware, as well as things like spam and firewall, personal firewall, and real-time analytics around what's going on across the entire endpoint, detection of an attack, and then obviously mitigation of that, which then finally leads on to kind of where we are now with EDR, where we're able to identify and respond to threats that aren't just things that we know about, but understanding behavioral understanding, and actually looking at things like George was talking about, where executing A is perfectly fine, doing B is perfectly fine, doing C is, yeah, I guess you can do C, but hang on, doing A, B, and C together, really that is behavior which we're able to understand as being a threat, and actually being ahead and remediate that before the payload is finally executed and compromise has occurred. And those EDRs are normally wrapped up in either some tooling which you can execute yourself, or you can use a third-party provider who has experienced threat analytics people and experienced threat hunters to be able to go out there and remediate those activities. I'll skip over MDR pretty quickly, but again, that same evolution from SIEM, from collecting all that information together from multiple sources. Again, one of these things, having a very narrow viewpoint on something doesn't give you the holistic viewpoint, which means that you're able to miss stuff. So with SIEM, you're able to bring everything together to a single point. So you're able to see an antivirus log, as well as a firewall log, as well as a application error log, as well as a network log, as well as server log, all together to be able to make sure that they correlate via SOC, to be able to bring all that information together, to be able to act upon stuff that in itself may not be malicious. But when we introduce SOAR, so the orchestration and automated part of it, we're able to collect all that information and start responding to those threats where we see somebody logging on from an odd location where they don't normally come from. That's okay because people travel, but actually also performing action B, which might be to log on a server they don't normally log on to. Again, that in itself probably okay. And then often see suddenly connecting to 300 devices via a SSH session. Definitely probably not ideal, but with those three things together, we clearly do that. That's clearly a threat which is not normal. So, and then that moves on to the MDR, where we are then detecting those behaviors and then providing runbooks and scenario testing to be able to provide that assurance that if someone does get into your environment, which they probably will at some point, that we can detect it quickly and respond to it before they can act upon that intrusion. So with the Microsoft stack, Microsoft introduced Sentinel a few years ago, and this is a really interesting platform for us because it is that SIEM and SOAR platform. So we're able to collect the information from multiple sources, whether that's from Azure or a Defender for endpoints, or whether it be from any other antivirus software, or from Office 365. And when we talk about MDR and network devices and firewalls, we can then detect within Sentinel those threats using the inbuilt intelligence that's built into it, and correlation and threat analysis, which goes to the investigate bit. We're able to look at the investigation, understand actually where the noise is, where the interesting information is, and be able to provide you with automated protection via the respond area. So we're able to look at a set of events that have occurred, analyze them as being a threat, and then automatically provide a response to that threat. So it might be like George talking about, where we have those 4 instances of someone executing reg DLL32 and a GIF being downloaded and etc. All those things together automatically trigger the fact that that endpoint is being looks like it's being attacked by malware. At that point, we can automatically decide to do something, whether that's just log a ticket in our platform, whether that's to send an alert to that user, or more likely to actually provide an action on the network. So we're going to go ahead and restrict access from that device to the VPN, so they can no longer, and restrict local network access, so they can only have access to maybe some SaaS platforms, or maybe increase the antivirus, deploy additional antivirus behavior on that device, but additional antivirus security or increased level of antivirus on that device to ensure that gets resolved. Okay, so Sentinel in general, that it is a SaaS platform, provides that SIEM and SOAR, and it is a fully scalable environment within Microsoft Azure. So with general SIEM and SOAR platforms, ultimately they are a set of servers and databases and analytic applications go through, and as and when you ingest more and more information, you need more servers, you need more things to do it, and also you have to build a lot of your responses and playbooks and all of the upgrades and stuff that you need to do on premises, or even in a cloud service. This is provided as a service from Microsoft, but you can also bring your own kind of threat intelligence models to it, link them in, and link into other communities as well. And it's really relatively simple to operate as a platform, but there are limitations to it, which I'll go into in a minute. But ultimately, it gives you a really easy viewpoint into your whole environment, and easy to ingest information, and easy to start doing that analytics. What you do with that going forward is where it gets a little bit more complicated. So, what is Sentinel at a glance? So we have our collection services. So where we talk about that whole scene piece. So we have applications using infrastructure, so we can bring in information from things like Microsoft Defender for endpoints. We can bring in information from I know Citrix application, SQL application logs. We can bring in information from user activity using syslog information from log analytics service, should we want to. We can also bring information directly in from cloud providers, so from AWS, Microsoft Azure, and connect to those and bring in information from the platform there, as well as other party platforms, things like ServiceNow or Workday or Salesforce and that sort of stuff. And clearly, we want to bring in information from security solutions, so Checkpoint, Cisco, Palo Alto, F5, Barracuda, and all sorts of things. So we ingest those within the Sentinel platform, and it creates a gigantic data repository, data lake essentially, which we can then search upon. And at the top level, we have visibility to that, so we can make custom dashboards, which in Azure is really useful. We're able to create a dashboard for the threat detectors or your security analysts, or our security analysts, to be able to view what's going on and be able to respond to these threats. You can also create dashboards for your CIO or your CISO or your board or whoever. And in the instance of Ultima Red Scan, we probably can provide dashboards for users, so they have visibility of what's going on as well. We then analyze and detect using machine learning and user behavioral analytics, entity behavior analytics, and we can run predefined playbooks and whatever or queries to actually understand what's going on, and then we deliver those playbooks. And again, this is all buildable by yourself if you know what you're doing within Sentinel. And then you can then integrate this within tools such as ServiceNow and such. So we at Ultima Red Scan use ServiceNow to integrate directly with Sentinel to be able to bring out the information, the alerts and the analytics straight into ServiceNow to enable us to action it quicker and better and correlate it better. So onto that, back to that collection bit. What sort of things can we collect within Sentinel? So we have a huge. This is actually quite an early screenshot of some of the connectors. This is now this list is now massive. So there's a bunch of pre-built connectors. We can literally just configure and point at a device that already or service that already exists. So whether it be 365 or whether it be Security Center or Windows Firewall, we can bring that information in. The key ones there again are the firewall providers, so ASA or now Firepower as well, Checkpoint, Fortinet, Palo Alto, F5, Barracuda, that sort of stuff. We can stuck the information in, so you can use those predefined ones. You can also create your own. You can use syslog to bring that information in. You can just read raw text if you want to, or you can create your own connectors as well within Azure Sentinel. So you can connect those connectors to various log files or various APIs that are out there to be able to ingest information from these other providers. So why this over traditional SIEM? I guess the key thing really is the fact that that scalability from having that SaaS service and that ease of setup. There's still a fair amount of configuration to do, but that ease of the initial out-the-box setup, we can turn this thing on within hours, and then we can tune it over a period of time. So there's no hardware setup, there's no cost for that hardware setup. It's as a service, pay monthly. There's no maintenance. It upgrades itself. It maintains that. The responsibility is still there for you to actually provide that threat activity remediation, as well as build those playbooks and build the analytics models. Let's say there are ones out of the box, but there are more detailed ones which you're going to want to create yourselves or get a partner such as RedScan and Ultima to do. And then, but what's really key with most people on this call will probably almost certainly have an Azure presence already, and may or may not be using Defender, or may or may not be using 365 audit logs as well. So where this is key with this is as well with Sentinel, it's for those customers. A lot of that ingestion is free. So we can ingest Defender for 365 and Defender for endpoint information, as well as security center information and AIP. We can ingest all of that in, and you don't get charged for that. Although you do get charged now for Azure AD, which is a bit of a shame. But it does mean that out the box you can turn on a number of these features and functions, and get the ingestion for it for free. Obviously, you're going to want to then start turning on that additional capability of ingesting firewall information and stuff, and that's where you can start to scale out that. So where can Ultima and RedScan help with this? So we've got those cloud environments, those environments you have, the client environment. So you have cloud resources, Azure virtual machines, or PaaS SaaS services. You may have say Salesforce or whatever. It might have applications as well, your Linux applications that are generating logs and generating information or monitoring services we can look at. Your network infrastructure, so networks and security, firewall, platforms, endpoints. The key area here is for the EDR service is that getting that endpoint protection. We can pretty much plug into anything, but there are things like Defender, which is a really useful tool for us to plug in for EDR. And also the identity management. So I don't know whether it would be Azure AD or Okta or whatever. We then, so it's agnostic approach. We can pretty much ingest anything, provide those SIEM and EDR services, which we spoke about earlier, which are more managed. So we would look after that service for you. We can also provide network behavior analysis, as well as things like vulnerability assessments. These are all additional things we can plug in to help really shore up that security layer. So vulnerability assessment, understanding not just when a threat occurs or where you have a threat, but actually going on understanding what vulnerabilities you have in your environment. So when George spoke about, most of these attacks are, or a number of these attacks are based on vulnerabilities that already exist through VMware or from Exchange or through Fortinet. Well, actually we can provide that information to you as well. And again, that user entity behavioral analytics, understand what's going on, understanding that behavior, a user logging on to A, then doing B, and then doing C. That's unusual. We can go and investigate that. And then RedScan Labs, they can look at custom watch. They get a huge array of inputs from various watch lists to be able to understand not just threats that are understanding or behavior analysis, but also understanding things that are occurring out in the wild, things that have just come out. We can look at the behavior of those things and then start to understand the analytics within your environment to see when those things occur. So I'll just spin these both up. So what does that mean for CyberOps and our service integration? So we can take all those real-time security updates that are occurring and those third-party threat intelligence information, as well as just people sat there analyzing logs and analyzing vulnerability data feeds to be able to then generate tickets, to be able to do something through ServiceNow, to be able to actually understand what we're going to do, what we're going to respond. We can orchestrate those responses. So like I spoke about earlier, we'll be generating automated playbooks or manual playbooks. A lot of customers prefer manual execution of these playbooks because some of the actions are things like disable account. So we need to be a bit careful sometimes with or disable access to server if that server were to have malware detected. So we can certainly look at those playbooks, run them, create bespoke one, but also create best practice, industry best practice, and RedScan Labs best practice ones to understand to isolate, kill, and then delete these threats from your environment and remediate. And then our 24/7 UK-based SOC service, so able to have actual people with eyes on screens, using the fully accredited. The certification is key when we're looking at SOCs. So if you're not CREST certified or accredited, then you're not really playing it in the right space. So CREST certified or accredited SOC, being able to go and understand and actually do proactive threat hunting as well. So not only are we looking at alerting that's going on, but we're actually proactively looking through logs and proactively understanding behavior that we've not seen before, and understanding what that might be, and detecting that earlier on within that execution cycle. And then even things like we can provide services around proactively going out and testing your defenses. So whether that's pretending to be a foreign actor to understand whether those defenses are good enough, and understand what your, I guess, risk profile is within your environment. And so for you, what does that mean? I guess one of the key things, again, that George spoke about earlier was that time to execute now is so small for these threat actors. They'll get into your environment, hide there, and then execute that attack, and then they'll be on your system and traversing it sometimes within an hour. So it's no good at the end of the day or the end of wherever looking through logs and saying, oh yeah, unusual behaviors occurred there, I need to go look at that. It's already too late. So reduced detection times is really key here to mitigate that east-west spread, as well as reduce response time. So making sure that we, when we do get that threat, that it's not sat in a queue for 4 hours, that we're actually acting upon it immediately and responding to it, and providing remediation guidance and support, or actually remediating using playbooks or whatever. And then that assurance as well, giving you that, I guess, more peace of mind that you have this level of protection, you have this experienced, certified, and actually it's RedScan and Dave's job to be able to go ahead and do this threat hunting, threat detection with these SOC analysts across multiple customers, so that where they see behavior with some customers, they're able to immediately understand that within other customers. So give that assurance that there's an enterprise grade security there, but also that compliance adherence, providing those vulnerability reports, providing that quality control and continuous improvement advice around how better to provide that security going forward. So so that's pretty much it for the actual presentation. I've got some questions which were asked in advance, which I'll just quickly go through. Let me stop my sharing for 2 seconds. Okay, so as some questions come through, we've got one. This is one for you, George. If the criminals are moving more quickly once they're in the network, how soon do you need to detect them before it's too late? I think we've kind of partly answered this already, but I don't know if you want to elaborate on it a bit more, George.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it does depend on the threat actor and the type of malware, but really it's the earlier the better. As I said, we have observed some threat actors moving from initial infection to move to domain controller access in less than an hour. So yeah, the time to detect and respond really is now a super critical part of the kill chain. So yeah, I think the answer really is as quickly as you possibly can.
Yeah, indeed, yeah, I agree. And I've got one here. Can I still maintain access to Sentinel and/or Security Center UIs? So yeah, so I can probably pick this up. So we absolutely can. So we use a number of systems like ServiceNow to ingest a lot of this information into our own systems, but ultimately this is running in Azure, and the Azure Sentinel dashboard is available for customers to see. We also use technology such as Lighthouse, which allows kind of like an MSP viewpoint on customers' security environments. So we can look at logs, and we can look at the threat detection across multiple customers from a single location for us, for RedScan, and but the customers still have access to their own environment, so there's nothing taking away that viewpoint. So I think we're probably running a little bit over time here. So what I'll do, I'll send out the rest of the questions and answers over by email to everybody attendee, and we'll also post the webinar up on our internet and via social, our website and via social channels as well, so we can review this again and or share it with your colleagues. And lastly, just like to say thank you for attending. We if you want to know any more, there's quite a light, high-level viewpoint, touch point on this, but if you want to know any more information or any more information on MDR, EDR, or anything really around the security space, please do reach out to Ultima and RedScan. We'll be sending out contact details later on, again, for everybody who attended. But lastly, I want to thank you, George, and the team of RedScan for presenting, and thank you all for attending, and have a good rest of your day.